Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cabinet of Curiosities on our own devices. I'm Jean Messier, and today I'm at 17 Wing in Winnipeg looking at a pair of boots. But not just any ordinary boots. These are what are known as escape boots, and these would have been issued to Allied aircrew starting in 1943. And these are a very clever solution to a problem that I don't think a lot of people would have considered at the time. Now, when you're flying at 15,000 feet or higher, you're going to need warm clothing to protect you from the extremely low temperatures at those altitudes. But if you're shot down, if you bail out and you find yourself in enemy territory trying to evade capture, unless it's the dead of winter, you're going to become very uncomfortable very quickly. Your legs are going to get very hot, sweaty, they're going to swell, you're going to get blisters and sores, you're going to have a bad time. Even worse than that, even if you manage to get hold of civilian clothing to disguise yourself, if you're still walking around in your big aviator boots, you're going to get spotted very quickly and find yourself in enemy hands. So these boots are designed to be convertible from an aviator pattern into an ordinary-looking civilian shoe. The top half of the boot and the bottom half are connected by a thin strip of webbing, and there's actually a knife supplied in a little pocket on the inside. This one is missing the knife, that allowed you to cut away at the top and leaving you with a perfectly ordinary, innocent-looking civilian shoe. And this would not only be less conspicuous than boots, but also be more comfortable for escape and evasion. And as an added bonus, you could take the top halves of the boots, unfold them, sew them back together, and it created a nice little fleece-lined vest for you, which is good if you're hiding out in the woods on a cold night. So these were the brainchild of one Christopher Clayton, or Clutty Hutton, who was a brilliant, if a little eccentric, MI9 officer during the Second World War. And he was hired into MI9 by Brigadier Norman Crockett early in the war in order to come up with techniques and equipment to help Allied aircrew escape capture or to escape from prisoner of war camps. And early in this job, he met up with a pilot named Johnny Evans, who offered him some insight into what it was that an airman needed to escape. And he said that there were three basic things he needed. One was a map to let him know the best way to escape. The second was a compass that could be concealed that he could use with said map in order to escape. And number three was food, because he said that there's nothing more dangerous to an airman who's trying to escape than hunger. It makes you reckless, it makes you foolish. You go into populated areas, you try to steal food, you interact with civilians, and all of these put you at an increased risk of being captured. So one of the first things that Clayton developed was an emergency food pack. It was a little cigarette tin that contained things like condensed milk, chocolate powder, benzodrine, which is a stimulant, as well as a rubber water bag for collecting and carrying water around, maybe from a river or from a local well. And, these were adequate, but it was found by RAF pilots who were shot down over the Channel or in the North Sea that these things were not adequately waterproof, and if water leaked in, it quickly ruined the food. So this was changed to a different pack, which was a clear plastic bottle with a wide neck that all of the survival gear would be packed into, and then the bottle itself could be used as a water container. And this solved the issue with the rubber water bag, which is in storage, it tended to rot and disintegrate. So one of the things that Clayton was most famous for were escape maps, and these were printed on little sheets of silk so that if you crumpled them up and wound them up into a small size, they would not get wrinkled, it would not destroy any of the detail on the map. And originally he had problems with this. He found that if he tried to print a regular map onto a silk handkerchief, the ink tended to smudge. But then he hit upon the idea of using pectin, which is used for making preserves, and this worked. This allowed very finely detailed maps to be printed on handkerchiefs, and these were very easy to fold up and hide away. And these became something of a cultural item after the war. I remember seeing an exhibit on wartime fashion at the Imperial War Museum in London, and there was this rather fetching housecoat that the girlfriend of an RAF airman had stitched together from these escape maps. Rather beautiful. I'll see if I can find a picture of it. There were also other types of maps he developed. One was to print it on mulberry paper, which can be folded up into a very small ball and put inside, say, the barrel of a fountain pen or a shaving brush or something like that. And then you can wet it and fold it out, and you can fold it out without creasing it. So that was also a very successful item. There were a number of other crazy ideas they tried. One of them was a map hidden in playing cards. So you would have to soak the playing cards in water and peel them apart and then assemble them according to a key to create your map. And that's the sort of thing that would have been sent to POW camps in, say, Red Cross care packages, which we'll get to in a second. And I've also heard of maps that were printed in a special invisible ink where the airmen would actually have to urinate on the map in order to reveal the design. So this made it less likely for the Germans to find and confiscate. Now, the third piece of equipment that Clayton is very famous for is the button compass. So this was a little compass with a little radium dot on it that was concealed inside a tunic button. And thousands of these were issued. They were very useful. But the cleverest part of these buttons was Clayton knew that the Germans would search everything on Allied aircrew if they were ever captured. And so he actually reverse threaded it with a left-hand thread so that if the Germans tried to unscrew it the regular way, it wouldn't open and they would think, oh, there's nothing in this button, whereas the aircrew would actually know that you unthreaded it the other way. So, attention to detail that characterized a lot of the stuff that Clayton came up with. And that reverse threading idea would be carried on into other escape objects like shaving brush handles and fountain pens that were used to hide escape equipment. Now, there were a couple of other types of compasses issued. These are typically regular metallic objects that were magnetized so that they became compasses. So, for example, nibs on fountain pens or the filling levers on a fountain pen or a pencil clip, which had a little divot in it so that you could actually take the clip off the pencil and balance it on the pencil point, and it would point towards north. Another technique that was used was to magnetize razor blades, so you could actually very carefully float that razor blade on water, and it would also point towards north. So all sorts of little clever spins on the compass. And it didn't really stop there. He came up with a whole bunch of neat devices. Another famous one was the Geely saw, or the wire saw. He needed something that Allied aircrew in POW camps could use to get to saw through bars and other obstacles. Obviously, it's very hard to hide a hacksaw blade, but a friend of his mentioned to him that doctors use the Geely saw, this thin, flexible wire saw, for very precise bone-cutting applications. So he acquired these and then covered the saw in felt to create shoelaces. So Allied airmen would have these in their shoelaces, and they could just untie them, pull the saw out, attach a pair of handles, and they could cut through whatever they wanted. So that was the equipment that was intended to be carried by Allied airmen on their person in case they were shot down over enemy territory. But there was also a wide range of equipment that was developed by Clayton and MI9 that was meant to be smuggled into prisoner of war camps through care packages. And these were, in many cases, equally genius. For example, one technique was to hide German currency and identity papers and other documentation inside phonograph records or even inside game boards. In fact, they contacted the copyright holder for Monopoly in the UK and got them to insert these documents into their boards, which were then sent overseas to POW camps as recreational items. Another major area of work was in providing POWs with the means of making clothing for their escape, so either civilian clothing or military clothing. And there was a provision in the Geneva Convention that said that POWs were entitled to receive new uniforms when they became available. So what Clayton did was he created this fake type of new uniform that was going to be issued to all Allied air personnel, which was specifically designed in terms of its material and its cut to look as close to a Luftwaffe uniform as possible, so it could be easily converted. And since Luftwaffe uniforms had a lot of gold and silver braid and piping on them, the packages that these uniforms came in were wrapped in metal wire, which could then be used to make these details. They also found out that POWs had become very adept at making their own fake iron crosses, but to make that a little bit easier, they sent packages wrapped in ribbon that was, red, white, and black, so that they could make even more authentic iron crosses. Another technique that was used was to send blankets, which was a very common thing to include in a care package, with patterns for coats and jackets and pants and things like that drawn on them, but in an ink that would only show up after the blankets had been washed once. And these could be sent to the camp tailor to make a wide variety of clothing for the prisoners for them to escape in. And to provide different colors for this clothing, they came up with a fountain pen that worked regular. It had a regular ink compartment, but it also had a secret compartment in it with little packs of ink that could be mixed with water and used to dye the cloth various colors. So there'd be a variety of options for the POWs. And like I said, these would be smuggled in through care packages, though not from the Red Cross, because then the Red Cross might not have been allowed to send any more packages. It might have been a breach of international law. They left the Red Cross alone. But MI9 set up a number of fake charitable organizations in the UK and started sending care packages, initially virgin packages, which had nothing untoward in them. And after a while, once they were certain that the Germans didn't suspect anything, they started sneaking in all this equipment through those packages. And they were very successful in getting a lot of equipment to POWs. So the usefulness of these devices really can't be quantified, but it was probably not zero, since over 35,000 Allied personnel managed to escape from POW camps throughout the war, although most of them were immediately recaptured, with only around 1,500 making the home run back to the UK and other Allied nations. However, the expenditure of men and material to track down and recapture all of these escaped personnel tied up a lot of valuable resources that could have been used elsewhere, so it definitely contributed to the end of the war. Now, as for these boots, reception of these was rather mixed. Airmen found that they weren't as comfortable as they thought. They tended to get waterlogged. They tended to develop sores while wearing them. They were somewhat useful, but not as much as Clayton might have hoped. And another problem that they found early on was that these boots were far too loose. And so when you pulled your parachute, the shock of the parachute opening would cause your boots to fly right off your feet, which you can recognize as something of a problem. So in later versions, they added these straps up here to make sure that the boots stayed on your feet. Now, Clayton himself ran into a bit of a problem after the war when he tried to publish his memoirs, titled A Journey Has Been Arranged. He was under the impression that the information that he was disclosing wasn't really that secret. Most of it had already been disclosed by other media outlets, and in the Cold War context really wasn't valuable. Like, none of this was going to affect the safety of airmen flying in and around Russia. But the government thought differently. They thought that he was breaching the Official Secrets Act, and they blocked the publication of his memoir for over a decade. In fact, they went so far as to authorize this publication under a different name, with Clayton's name replaced with Mr. X and 60% of the content redacted, and even like statements, calling him irresponsible and dangerous and just like denigrating his name. So he actually took the government to court for libel. And eventually, after a decade, he won his case and he managed to publish his memoirs under the name Official Secret in 1960. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. And again, a big thank you to the Heritage staff at 17 Wing for allowing me to go through their collection and pull out fascinating artifacts just like this one. More to come in the future, so please stay tuned. Until then, I'm Jean Messier from Our Own Devices. Have a great day.